For decades, there's been this one topic that has lived way out on the absolute fringes of science. But now, all of a sudden, it's front and center in the halls of government and academia. We're, of course, talking about unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. And the story of how we got here, well, it's a really fascinating clash between scientific integrity and a stigma that's been baked in for a very, very long time. Now listen to this. That's not a line from some sci-fi blockbuster. It's a direct account coming from a U.S. admiral. And it's reports just like this one from credible, high-level military witnesses that are forcing a massive shift in thinking. We've moved so far beyond grainy photos and old tabloid headlines. But for the longest time, for ages, the official scientific consensus was crystal clear. This was all just nonsense. The topic was tangled up with sensationalism and conspiracy theories, and it was considered completely unworthy of any serious investigation. As far as science was concerned, the case was closed. So, what on earth changed? What could possibly bridge that enormous gap between a U.S. admiral reporting football field-sized objects and decades of scientific eye-rolling? To really get what's happening now, we first have to understand the powerful force that kept this whole topic in the dark for so long. See, it wasn't just a simple lack of interest. A powerful stigma, almost like a professional taboo, was actively built around UAP research. This giggle factor, as some call it, made it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for any serious scientists to even touch the subject without risking their career. And it's so important to get this. We're not just talking about individual opinions here. A scientific stigma is a systemic problem. It creates this whole culture of self-censorship, where researchers, even if they're genuinely curious, just keep their mouths shut because they're afraid of the professional consequences. And here's the kicker. The stigma wasn't an accident. It all started with serious government studies back in the 40s. But then, by 1953, a CIA panel literally recommended a public relations campaign of just debunking everything to kill public interest. The final nail in the coffin, though, was the 1968 Condon Report. It declared the whole topic scientifically worthless. And for almost 50 years, that was that. So this created a massive conflict for any scientist who might have been interested. On one hand, you have your career incentives, your reputation, getting funding, just staying in the good graces of the academic community. And on the other hand, you have the actual principles of science itself, to be curious, to follow the data wherever it leads, and to explore the unknown. They were in direct opposition. But the barriers weren't just out there in the institutions. They were also inside our own heads. Because if you really want to tackle a controversial topic like this, you have to be super aware of the common mental shortcuts, the cognitive biases that can seriously cloud our judgment. And that brings us to these 6 common reasoning errors that affect everybody, skeptics and believers alike, when we're faced with a subject like UAPs. And trust me, understanding these is absolutely key to thinking clearly about the unknown. First up, we've got overcorrection bias. You've probably heard the saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, that's this, exactly. The logic goes something like this. Because the topic is filled with some hoaxes and misidentifications, then everything related to it must also be a hoax. And that just shuts down any real inquiry before it can even start. Next, there's the appeal to consensus. This is the assumption that, hey, if this were real, the experts would already be on board. But this completely ignores a huge fact. Pretty much every major scientific revolution, from discovering the Earth is round to figuring out quantum physics, started as some wild fringe idea that completely overturned the old consensus. Then we have reductionism bias. This is when you run into a really complex event with all sorts of strange data points, but you only focus on the easy parts you can explain away. You might say, oh, that weird light was just the planet Venus, while totally ignoring the pilot's testimony that it then accelerated to impossible speeds. Now, this one is subtle, but it is so powerful. Identity-based skepticism. It's what happens when being the skeptic in the room becomes more important than the actual process of skepticism. It stops being a tool for finding truth and becomes more like a shield to protect an identity. And that just leads to reflexively dismissing any challenging evidence. And a close cousin to that is the anomaly ignore fallacy. You know when you have a set of data, but a few of the points, the anomalies, don't quite fit your theory? So you just call them outliers or noise and you toss them out. But throughout the history of science, it's those very anomalies that often lead to the biggest breakthroughs. And all of this kind of culminates in the unknown equals impossible fallacy. This is that critical, totally unscientific leap from saying, we don't have an explanation for this yet, to saying this is impossible, and therefore it cannot be real. It just slams the door on inquiry, when the whole point of science is to pry that door open. Okay, so if we want to break through this wall of stigma and get past our own built-in biases, how do we do it? Well, researchers are now proposing a whole new intellectual framework, a way to study the unexplainable without jumping to any conclusions. And the proposed solution is a concept called methodological agnosticism. Now, it sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. It's about applying the entire toolkit of science, data collection, rigorous analysis, peer review, to the phenomenon itself, while staying completely neutral or agnostic about what the final explanation might be. You don't start with belief, you don't start with disbelief, you just start with the data. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb just puts it perfectly here. This new approach isn't about throwing skepticism out the window. It's about getting back to the absolute core of what science is supposed to be, having the humility to admit what we don't know, and having the courage to go find out. And what's so cool is that this isn't just some philosophical idea anymore. It is a full-blown movement. Right now, major institutions are creating formal programs to collect and analyze UAP data, totally free from that old, suffocating stigma. I mean, just look at this list. We're talking about the Galileo Project at Harvard, the Pentagon's very own AARO office, independent scientific coalitions, and even a NASA independent study team. This represents a seismic shift. It's a recognition from the highest levels of science and government that there's actually data here that's worth collecting. So why does all of this matter, right? Why should we really care if scientists are studying strange things in the sky? Because the consequences of ignoring it, as we're starting to see, are very, very real. The stakes are high. First off, aviation safety. The Pentagon has confirmed at least 11 near misses. That's terrifying. Then there's national security. When our best military pilots are encountering technology that can outperform our own, that is a security concern by definition. There's also the well-being of the witnesses. For decades, credible people were ridiculed and risked their careers just to make these reports. And finally, this is about scientific integrity itself. Science only moves forward by confronting anomalies, not by laughing at them. And all of this leads to this final crucial question. The UAP topic shows us just how a powerful stigma can sideline a legitimate area of inquiry for decades. It really makes you wonder, what else are we not looking at? What other potential breakthroughs are we ignoring simply because we're afraid to ask the question?